Bhagavan reveals that the self alone is real, the self alone exists. It is the height of grace, and it is the supreme knowledge. The self is Brahman, and it is so to such an extent that there is not a trace of another kind of self. All this is Brahman, and to such an extent that there is no scope for all this, differentiated even in the least degree. Jagat-jiva-para, the universe, the individual, the supreme. Sri Ramana says that the three are differentiated as such only so long as the ego is assumed. If that ego assumption vanishes due to clear, profound inquiry, all differentiation also vanishes, and one self, Brahman itself, is found to exist alone and eternally. If the individual or jiva is assumed as one's identity, then there seems to be a world, a sphere of objectified experience, that is to say, the universe, apart from it. Similarly, if you take yourself to be the individual, the absolute, that is Brahman, the true self, will seem as if something distinct from you, apart from you. The forms as supposed to be the universe and the supreme correspond to the forms of misidentification supposed for the individual. In other words, how you view yourself determines how you view all else. Indeed, the very idea of all else is dependent on the idea of I. To realize the truth, therefore, it is imperative that one know oneself. What is truly yourself? If you suppose yourself to be the body, then of course there will be something else, for the body is such a small, temporary thing. But are you the body? If you truly realize that you're not the body, the idea of an external world disappears. The existence that remains, bodiless and worldless, is truly the self, or Brahman. If you are an individual entity or an ego, then there will be something else, for the ego is an infinitesimal supposition, a momentary illusion with no substance. But what truly is the significance of I? The notion of individuality or ego appears and disappears according to imagination. You don't appear and disappear, you exist. Can you be the ego? Without the ego notion, the differentiation of jagat-jiva-para, the universe, the individual, the supreme, vanishes. What remains is one solitary existence of the nature of infinite consciousness, and that being perfectly full is bliss. The consciousness which is being spoken of is truly your consciousness, not another. The existence being spoken of is your very being, not something else. It is the characteristic of delusion to take the self to be the not-self, that is other than oneself, and to take that which is other than the self to be the self. It's all upside down. Inquiry clarifies matters. Inquire deeply within yourself as to what your true nature is. Who am I? Then you find the self as the self, and the not-self does not exist at all. For there is only one self, one existence. There is nothing theoretical or abstract about existence. It is formless, yet entirely real. There is nothing theoretical or abstract about consciousness. It is the existence itself. Abandon any tendency to delusively imagine yourself as an ego or as a body. Tracing your own sense of existence inward, by the light of that existence, that is, the innate knowledge of consciousness, determine what in truth you are. The inquiry in such a manner is non-objective. You are not asking about something else, studying something else. You are inquiring into your own existence. Who is doing so? That is the inquiry. By His grace, by His instruction, turn within, so that the withinness knows itself. Truth, Brahman, knows itself.
following your words, the experience was over and over again, turning the mind back in on itself and inquiring, who am I? And it's almost like these mandalas of inquiry, going round and round, further inward. And what I notice starts to happen is that the waking state and the elements that you pointed out of the individual, the world, and God start to disappear, just like last night's dream disappears from the waking state. So I was asking myself, what's actually happening when I negate the waking, or from the waking state? How is it that I can actually negate the dream state? And I think the inquiry reveals it, because I'm not in the dreaming state from the waking state, because it's entirely unreal. I am not in it at all. There's no I in the dream state, it's gone. And as I keep doing the inquiry as you speak, the same thing happens with the waking state, as my identity just gets extracted from it. And just keep coming back to who am I? And just
You are not an appearance in the waking state. Obviously, you're not an appearance in the dream state. You are not even the appearance, if we can call it such, in the deep dreamless sleep state. You're nothing that appears in the three states. Similarly, you are not the experiencer of the waking state, nor of the dream, nor of sleep. Your existence cannot be described as a state. The confusion regarding one's identity is the cause of all other kinds of illusion, such as a state, a mind, a world, experience within that, time, space, and the rest of it. If we understand that the object depends entirely upon the subject, the known upon the knower, and unswervingly inquire to know the knower, existence as it is, the self remains. Just as it is not in any state, it is not in any life, it is not born, it does not perish. Now, if you're not in the waking state and you're not a waking state experiencer, then everything that has been conceived in the waking state at any time is equally delusive. Beyond the three states, birthless and deathless, the self has been referred to as Turiya, the fourth, something other than the three states. It is of the nature of infinite consciousness. But so that we would not think of that as another kind of state, wise sages have also declared it to be beyond the fourth. That is, free of any such conception. Now, what would you think of a man who woke up from his dream so that the dream was over and says that the dream is not real, but would continue to believe in what he dreamed as if it were still existing? The things and ideas that populated his dream. The dream is over, he's not in there. But it would be absurd if he went on thinking that the things and thoughts of the dream still remained. Likewise is it with any vasanas retained by one who has heard the truth about his nature.
Thank you, Master. In a certain sense, I always enjoy when an analogy goes to dream character because it's so easy to pick on the dream character. And for instance, the dream character could have some unexamined assumptions that would be almost too silly to speak of in the waking state. So I would ask you to sort of help this dream character dispel just two of them, for example. One would be that to transcend the dream world, the dream character kind of assumes that his senses should either be disabled or greatly altered first, and then he could transcend the dream world. And then his mind, in order to be unattached and not identified, his mind should start thinking in terms of mental indifference to everything. Like, those would be two silly ideas. But, you know, they could be there in that dream character. Unexamined. I don't know,
Am I supposed to...
anticipation that these bizarre things would happen first before his consciousness was more clear.
Am I supposed to reply to a dream character?
What's that?
Am I supposed to reply to a dream character? Or
Yeah, because it's less embarrassing that way.
Are you a dream character?
No, but, you know, I mean, I just picked those as examples, but I think it's possible to have all kinds.
If you are not a dream character, let the dream character deal with those problems.
Okay, but I think...
You stay out of it.
I've had those ideas at some point.
Are you in the waking state?
So it's the same answer.
Why would you suppose that you would need to undergo a massive change of the senses in order to realize that you're not the senses? That would be like supposing that the material objects around one had to undergo some cataclysmic change in order for one to become detached from them. It's absurd. As for indifference, first find that which is unchangeful, unchanging, and blissful by its very nature. Then decide whether it's mental or not. The illusion is already changing. One need not change the illusion to get beyond it. Now, if you want to say that you, the supreme Brahman of the nature of infinite consciousness, assuming yourself to be an ego, is an embarrassing situation, you can do so. But really, there's no one to be embarrassed. In your quest for self-knowledge, look directly for that knowledge of the self, and not an alteration of objective phenomena, inclusive of the senses.
every time I listen to your words and follow the meditation of them, it's like starting a new verse in Ribhu over. Or not starting it over, but it's like starting where it feels like I'm someplace and I'm listening to things. And then as the verse goes on, who is ever at the beginning of it is not there at the end. And the question you posed earlier about, I don't know if I can even get a hold of the question again, but it has to do with where you pointed out about the dreamer, and that one, when you see you're not the dreamer, to take up that as your identity again. That's just a mistake to do that on all levels. It's just, and so you were sort of posting the question, could you actually I mean, you wouldn't take anything serious about the dreamer in the dream state. Now, would you take this guy any more serious? And if I just continue to inquire in there, who am I? That's the thing that answers that question. Because it's like there's a doubt if there's something going on like that, and when I inquire, it solves that doubt.
Inquiry solves the doubt, removing it thoroughly, cutting it from top to bottom, so that the notion of I and every other idea attendant on that I is destroyed. It's destroyed by knowledge, which ignorance cannot survive. It's not the destruction of any real thing, it is the cessation of imagination, specifically in the form of misidentification. So the I is vanquished, and likewise all the vasanas or tendencies associated with that I, all the patterns of thinking based upon that misidentification, all such vanishes. To say that one would know oneself, but retain the tendencies that were based on the delusion of concerning the self, of an ego, that is absurd. So, having been instructed in the truth, that is in self-knowledge, be sure your inquiry is so thorough, so deep, that nothing from top to bottom of the illusion remains. Wake up from the dream entirely. Cease to posit your identity, which belongs to absolute existence, pure self. Cease to posit that identity in something totally unreal. When you wake up from a dream, obviously you divest yourself of the dream world and the dream character. You don't remain attached to anything in the dream world. And you don't regard the dream character as having any importance. Because he's totally not there. Just so in this waking state.
So what is left there then is what we thought was a dream but isn't. Is that correct?
What do you mean? Explain.
You just said,
Without a dream character, without a dream world, there's no dream.
so there's nothing left.
There's something left. It's not mere nothingness. Nothing of the illusion is left.
Nothing of that's perceived by the senses then. Nothing.
And nothing conceived in the mind.
So you can't see it.
The unseen seer of all that is seen. The unheard hearer of all that is heard. The unknown knower of all that is known. Like this, the Upanishad describes it.
Can't figure that out.
You cannot see it with the eyes, but something knows all the seen and all the seeing. That something cannot be seen, but is inwardly realized. That by which it is inwardly realized we call self-knowledge. It is not sensory. And similarly, it is not a mental conception. Something knows all that is ever thought of by you. But it is never an object of thought. You cannot think of it. It's not a thing. So it is the unknown, unthought of, knower of all that is known, that all that is thought of. Yet it is beyond thought. That non-thought knowledge by which it is realized is called self-knowledge.
So there's no way to position yourself to know it because without that there is no future.
Well, it depends what we mean by position. You can turn inward, you can strive, you can inquire, you can devote yourself.
Those are all activities in time, though.
Are they? is that power by which one inquires to realize the timeless in time. Is the faith by which some have realized the eternal in time? In meditation in which the mind and the world itself dissolve? Is that in time? If we are bodies, we are in time. But we are not bodies.
So that which asked that question is what was in time.
But you are not in time. And the means by which you realize this is not time-bound either.
Right. And so
there's plenty,
it out.
there's plenty you can do spiritually. It's not a set of actions, not that kind of doing. There is plenty, though, that one can practice to make the knowledge easily comprehensible. So then, hearing of the absolutely transcendent nature of the real self, or Brahman, it's a mistake to think that, well, there's nothing we can do about it, we're just stuck here. In the meantime, or something. That's a mistaken idea. One can spiritually practice in such a way that misidentifications are uprooted and the ego is dissolved. You can practice in such a way that false attachments are relinquished as being false. In this and other ways you can practice intensely, clearly.
Self-sufficient.
Master, you said the self isn't an experience, nor is it a state. But what happens when the body, I don't even know if it would be an experience, but when you start feeling less embodied, like you don't feel like you're in the body, or the body kind of is functioning on its own. So I sometimes get scared of that.
Why?
Because I feel like if I don't have control of the body, then my happiness is slipping away.
Why do you make that connection? In what way are you in control of your body even now? Did you plan its birth?
No.
So right from step one, you were not in charge. It is not that you are presently embodied and that you become bodiless. The truth is the self is not the body for all eternity. and you are the self. Knowledge or inquiry simply reveals it. The revelation is a matter of direct experience, but it is not limited, so at points it said it is not an experience. It's not an experience of something else. Now, if you were the body, you'd have plenty of reason to fear. Look what can happen to the body at any moment, unexpectedly. But if you're not the body, then you have every reason to be fearless. And your peace can endure forever.
It seems like these experiences that until all misidentification is addressed, that there will be little fear left over.
But if you rise beyond dualism, if you rise beyond misidentification, your fear will dissolve. Where there's duality, as it were, there is fear. Where you mistake yourself to be something other than the self, fear will be there. Turn within. The fears, being rooted in delusion, dissolve.
So there's
From another angle of vision, you can rely on the support of grace and rest fearless. One who is devoted in his heart never perishes.
was just remembering what Bhagwan has said about being caught in the jaws of the tiger. It's kind of like once the devotee comes under Bhagwan's grace, that individual is dissolved or eaten or completely gone. Then it's only Bhagwan. There is no fear, there is no separation, no duality, just the eternity or infinity, and that's Bhagwan.
That is so true. He becomes the self of oneself. If you know this, if you experience this, you can never be bound and you can never suffer. His very existence is grace. It is grace for the sake of grace. What can we say about that?
Ashtavakra Uvacha Avinashinamaatmanam ekam vijñāya tattvataha tavatmajñasya ghorasya kathamartharjane ratihi.
Ashtavakra said, having known yourself as really indestructible and one, how is it that you, serene and knower of self, feel attached to the acquisition of wealth?
Atmajnanadaho pritihi Vishaya brahmagochare Shukterajnanato lobho Yatha rajata vibhrame.
Alas, as greed arises from the illusion of silver caused by the ignorance of mother of pearl, even so arises the attachment to the objects of illusory perception from the ignorance of the self.
Vishvam spurati yatredam Taranga iva sagare Sohamasmiti vijñāya Kim dina iva dhavasi.
Having known yourself to be that in which the universe appears like waves on the sea, why do you run about like a miserable being?
Shrutva pishuddha chaitanyam Atmanamati sundaram Upasthetyanta samsakto Malinyam adhigacchati.
Even after hearing oneself to be pure consciousness and surpassing beautiful, how can one be attached to lust and thus become unclean?
Sarva bhuteshu chatmanam Sarva bhutani chatmani Muner janata ascharyam Mamattvamanuvartate.
It is strange that the sense of ownership should continue even in the sage who has realized the self in all and all in the self.
Asthita paramadvaitam Moksharthepi vyavastitaha Ashcharyam kamavashago Vikalakeli shikshaya.
Strange that abiding in the supreme non-duality and intent on liberation, one should yet be subject to lust and be unsettled by the practice of amorous pastimes.
Udbhutam jnana durmitram Avadharyati durbalaha Ashcharyam kamamakankshet Kalamantam manushritaha.
It is strange that knowing lust to be an enemy of knowledge, one who has grown extremely weak and reached one's last days should yet be eager for sensual enjoyment.
Ihamutra viraktasya nitya nitya vivekinaha Ashcharyam mokshakamasya mokshadeva vibhishika.
It is strange that one who is unattached to the objects of this world and the next, who discriminates the eternal from the transient, and who longs for emancipation, should fear emancipation itself.
Dhirasto bojyamanepi pidyamanopi sarvada Atmanam kevalam pashyan Natushyati na kupyati.
But feted and feasted or tormented, the serene person ever sees the absolute self and is thus neither gratified nor angry.
Cheshtamanam shariram swam Pashyatyan shariravad Samstave chapi nindayam Kadham kshubhet mahashayah.
The high-souled person witnesses his own body acting as if it were another's. As such, how can he be disturbed by praise or blame?
Maya matramidam vishwam pashyan vigata kautukaha api sannihite mrityau kadham trasyati dhiradhihi.
Realizing this universe as mere illusion and losing all interest therein, how can one of steady mind fear even the approach of death?
Nispriham manasam yasya nairashyepi mahatmanaha tasyatma jnana triptasya tulana kena jayate.
With whom can we compare that great-souled one, contented with the knowledge of self, who is desireless even in disappointment?
Swabhavadeva janano drishyame tanna kinchana idam grahyam idam tyajyam sakim pashyati dhiradhihi.
Why should that steady-minded one who knows the object to be in its very nature nothing consider this fit to be accepted and that fit to be rejected?
Antastaktakashayasya nirdvandvasya nirashishaha yadrichaya gado bhogo na dukkhaya na tushtaye.
He who has given up worldly attachment from his mind, who is beyond the pairs of opposites, and who is free from desire, to him any experience coming as a matter of course does not cause either pleasure or pain.
अखिल परिपूरणमां ब्रह्मनाने आन्मावुक्कभिन्न पर ब्रह्मनाने सकलमुमाय तेरिकिன்ற ब्रह्मनाने षड्भाव विकारमिला ब्रह्मनाने துகளணுவும் மறுவாத பிரம்ம நானே, துவைத்தமில்லா சுத்த பர பிரம்ம நானென்று அகமருவும் விபரீதம் தீரும் மட்டும் அனவரதம் ஆதரவாய்ப் பழக வேண்டும். இந்த விதம் விசாரித்த விவேகியெல்லாம் ஏகபர பாவனையே இடைவிடாமல் சந்ததமும் செய்ததனால் விபரீதத்தை சற்றேனும் மிஞ்சாது நாசம் செய்தே அந்த அகம் பிரம்மாஸ்மி வாக்கியார்த்தம் ஆன அகண்டார்த்தத்தின் அனுபவத்தை புந்திதனில் பிரதிபந்தம் ஒன்றும் இன்றி பூரணமாயெப்போதும் பொருந்த வேண்டும். பலவிதமாம் வாதனையும் தூர தள்ளி பகர்ந்தபடி அகண்டார்த்தம் அனுபவிப்பாய். இலகுமகம் பிரம்மாஸ்மி வாக்கியார்த்தம் இவ்விதமாய் இசைப்புற்றோம் இனியோனக்கு. திலகமதாம் தத்துவமசி வாக்கியார்த்தம் திருடமாக சித்தமிசை தெரிய சொல்வாம். தலைமையதாய் தயங்கிய இவ்வாக்கியத்தில் தத்துவமசி என 3 பதங்களாமே. மாயெனும் உபாதியுறும் மீஷன் தானே மருவிய தத்பதமுறை செய்வாச்சியர்த்தம். ஆயதன அவிதியுறும் ஜீவன் தானே அறைகின்ற துவம் பதமோர் வாச்சியர்த்தம். மேயமதாம் உபாதியெல்லாம் இழந்த பின்னர் ஏகவிலக்ஷணமான வஸ்து தானே. தூய பதம் 2க்கும் லட்சியார்த்தம் தொடர்புற்ற ஐக்கியமே அசிப்பதார்த்தம். சொல்லிய இவ்வைக்கியமாம் அகண்டார்த்தத்தை சுத்தமதாம் தத்துவமசி வாக்கியத்தால் கல்லனவே திருடமாக அறிந்தெப்போதும் கலங்காமல் அகண்டைக ரசமேயாவாய். எல்லையில்லா அகண்டபடி வாகும் மட்டும் இதரமுணர் விருத்தியலாம் தூர தள்ளி புல்லுமகண்டாகார விருத்தி தன்னை புரையறவே பழகியதால் புன்ற நாவாய். தத்பதலட்சியமான பிரம்ம ரூபம் துவம்பதலட்சியமான நீயேயாவாய். அற்பமுமே இதிலையம் அமைவதில்லை அகண்ட சிவன் தன்னானை அறைந்ததுண்மை. சொற்பமில்லா அகண்ட பரிபூன்றமான சுத்தமதாம் பரபிரம்ம நீயே என்று செப்பியிடும் குருபரனே குருவாகின்றோன். செப்பியவாறறிந்தவனே ஷீடனானோன். சத்தியஜித் சுககணமாம் பிரம்ம நீயே சகல பரிபூரணமாம் பிரம்ம நீயே. நித்திய நிஷ்களமான பிரம்ம நீயே நிரந்தரமாய் நிறைந்த பர பிரம்ம நீயே. அத்வைத்தமான பர பிரம்ம நீ என்று ஐயமர உபதேசம் செய்கின்றோனே. உத்தமனாம் குருவாவன் மற்றோரெல்லாம் ஒரு காலம் உயர்வுற்ற குருவராகார். அலைவுற்ற அறிவான பிரம்ம நீயே அகண்டைக ரசமான பிரம்ம நீயே. நிலை பெற்ற நிశ్చலமாம் பிரம்ம நீயே நிராவரணம் ஆனபர பிரம்ம நீயே. சலமற்ற சாந்தபர பிரம்ம நீயே சதானந்த கனமான பிரம்ம நீ என்று உலைவற்ற உபதேசம் செய்கின்றோனே. உத்தமனாம் குருவாவன் மற்றோராகார். உச்சமதாம் குருவருளும் அகண்டார்த்தத்தை உவகையுடன் உள்ளபடி கேட்ட பின்னர் நிశ్చலமாம் புத்தியினால் நிச்சயித்து நிர்மலமாய் அகம் பிரம்மம் ஆனேனென்றே துச்சமிலா அனுபூதி அடைந்தவன்தான் துகளற்ற சச்சீடன் மற்றோரெல்லாம். எச்சலையைச் செய்யிலுமே சீடராகார் ஏகபரம் அறிந்தவனே சீடனாவன். சர்வமகாமந்திரமும் உபதேசிப்போர் சாமான்ய குருவரன சாற்றலாகும். இருமையிலா பரபிரம்ம நீயே என்றெங்கு இணையற்ற உபதேசம் செய்கின்றோனே. பெருமமிகும் சத்குருவென்று உரைக்கலாகும் பின் வெகுவாய்ப் பேசுவதற் பெரும்பேரன்ன. அரியபர நீ என்போனாசானோன் அகம் பிரம்மம் எனவறிவோன் மானானோன். ஆதலினால் பரபிரம்ம நீயே என்றெங்கு அருள்பவனே ஆசிரியன் எனவேயோர்ந்து. ஜாதகமாம் சத்குருவின் உபதேசத்தை சத்தியமாம் நம்பியதை சாதிப்போனே. பேதமிலா அகண்ட பர பிரம்ம ஞானம் பெற்றதனால் பவபந்தம் அனைத்தும் தீர்ந்து. போதகனம் மான பர வடிவேயாவன் புகன்றதிலோரணுவேணும் மையம் இல்லை. அகிலமறை முடிவுக்கும் அகண்டமான அத்வைத பரபிரம்ம ஸ்வரூபம் தானே. தகமெமிகும் தற்பரிய பொருளாமென்றும் தத் பிரம்ம நீ என்றும் உபதேசித்த. மகிமமிகும் சத்குருவின் வாக்கியத்தால் மகத்தான பரம்பொருளை கேட்டுள்ளத்தில். விகலமர அறிவதுவே சிரவணங்கான் வேறொன்றும் சிரவணமே என்றும் மைந்தா. அருள்வடிவாம் ஆசிரியன் அருளிச் செய்த அகில மகா வாக்கினுடை அகண்டார்த்தத்தை மருளறவே கேட்டுணர்தல் சிரவணங்கான் மற்றவெல்லாம் சிரவணமேயாகாவென்றும். சிரவணமே செயலுற்ற பொருளை மீண்டும் ஸ்ரத்தையுடன் யுக்தியினால் சிந்தை செய்தல். பிரம்மையெல்லாம் தீர்க்கின்ற மனனம் ஆகும் பேசிய எம்மனனத்தின் யுக்தி சொல்வாம். திரிசியமாய்ச் சிதைகின்ற உடல் நானல்லா தியங்கியிடும் பௌத்திகமாம் பொறி நானல்லா. பிரிவு பெறும் நானாவாம் உயிர் நானல்லா பிறந்து நசிக்கின்ற மன முதல் நானல்லா. இருள் வடிவாம் அஞ்ஞான உரு நானல்லா இவையாவும் ஒருமித்த திறனானல்லா. நிர்மலமாம் யாவையுமே நிகழ்த்தா நின்ற நிக்கமில்லா சின்மாத்திர ஸ்வரூபமே நான். ஸ்தூல உடல் சூக்ஷ்ம தேகத்தில் இல்லை ஸ்தூல உடல் சூக்ஷ உடல் எவ்விரண்டும். ஆலயமாம் காரண தேகத்தில் இல்லை அவை மூன்றும் துரியத்தில் இலவே இல்லை. கோலமுறும் தேகமெலாம் இலாமையாலும் கூறுபடா சின்மாத்திர ஸ்வரூபம் ஒன்றே. காலமொரு மூன்றிலுமே இருப்பதாலும் களங்கமில்லா சின்மாத்திர ஸ்வரூபமே நான். கனவினிடை நனவில்லை எவ்விரண்டும் காரணமாம் சுஷுப்திதனில் இல்லை எந்த. நனுவுகனா சுஷுப்திகளும் துரியத்தில்லை நாலுவித அவஸ்தைகளும் சுத்தத்தில்லை. சொனவிதமாய் அவஸ்தையெல்லாம் இலாமையாலும் சுத்தமதாம் சின்மாத்திர ஸ்வரூபம் ஒன்றே. அனவரதம் அழியாமல் இருப்பதாலும் அத்வைத சின்மாத்திர ஸ்வரூபமே நான். தேக முதல் ஜடமான இவையனைத்தும் திரிசியமாய் கடமெனவே நசிப்பதாலும் ஏகபர சின்மாத்திர வடிவாமான்மா எப்போதும் திருக்குருவாய் இருப்பதாலும் பாகமுறும் தேகாதி மித்யாகும் பகுப்பற்ற ஆன்மாவே உண்மையாகும். ஆகையினால் தேகாதி திறனானல்லா அனுசூத அறிவான ஆன்மாவே நான். சத்திய ஞானானந்த ஸ்வபாவமான சகல அதிஷ்டான பர பிரம்மத்தின்கள் சித்திரவ நிருத ஜட துக்கமான ஜகத்தெல்லாம் கல்பிதமாய் தோற்றலாலே. இத்வைத ஜகத்தெல்லாம் மாயும் காலை இலகும் அதிஷ்டான பர பிரம்மமேயாம். சுக்திகையில் கல்பிதமாய் தோற்றும் வெள்ளி சோதிக்கில் அதிஷ்டான சுக்திதானே. இருமையென தோற்றிய இஜகத்தனைத்து இருக்கின்ற திலகுகின்ற தின்பம் என்ன மருவிய இவ்வனுபூதியாயும் காலை மன்னும் அதிஷ்டானத்தின் ஸ்வபாவமேயாம் சர்வ அதிஷ்டான பரபிரம்மத்துக்கே சத்திய ஞானானந்த தன்மை என்றி ஒரு பொழுதும் இல்லாத வரும் பொய்யான உலகத்துக்கோதிய இத்தன்மையுண்டோ காலமொரு மூன்றிலுமே இருக்கையாலும் கல்பிதமாம் யாவையுமே விளக்கலாலும் சாலவுமே யாவையினும் இனிமையாலும் சத்திய ஞானானந்த ஸ்வரூபனானே ஆலயமாம் என்னிடையில் கனவே போல அகிலமுமே கல்பிதமாய் தோற்றலாலே கோரமுறும் தோற்றியிடும் தோற்றம் எல்லாம் குறைவற்ற அதிஷ்டான வடிவானானே.